If you could please call the roll.
Regent Bailing.
Here.
Regent Peterson.
Here.
Regent Atwell.
Here.
Regent Delgado.
Here.
Regent Evers.
Here.
Regent Greeby.
Here.
Regent Hall.
Here.
Regent Jones.
Here.
Regent Klein. Regent Milner.
Yes, here.
Regent Mueller.
Here.
Regent Peterson.
Here.
Regent Plant.
Here.
Regent Ring.
Here.
Regent Stile.
Here.
Regent Tyler.
Here.
Regent Whitburn.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good afternoon, everyone. I would first like to take this opportunity and thank Chancellor Mone for his team and his team's hospitality. We always look forward to the June board meeting and coming to see all the great things you have happening on the campus. Thank you, Chancellor. Before we consider items on today's agenda, are there board members this afternoon who wish to declare any conflicts of interest regarding today's agenda? As a reminder, this question is a result of a change in Regent policy we adopted in February regarding conflicts of interest. With this in mind, know that I'll be asking this question at all future meetings. Seeing no conflicts, let's go ahead and proceed. First, it's a pleasure today to introduce to the board our newest regent, Regent Chris Peterson of Grantsburg. Chris, by background, is the owner and chief financial officer of the Four Cubs Dairy Farm in Burnett County. She is a widely respected member of the agricultural community and has earned several prominent honors, including the 1997 Farm Woman of the Year and the 2004 World Dairy Expo Woman of the Year. She's also written multiple children's books regarding agriculture and the farming community. Chris also brings an additional perspective to our board. She previously served as a student regent at the University of Minnesota, where she received a degree in education. Chris, welcome, and would you like to say a few words?
Well, for one thing, I just want to let you know that it was about 100 years ago that I was on the Board of the Regents at Minnesota. I am so thrilled and honored to be part of the UW Board of Regents. I called my husband last night after the reception at Chancellor Mone's home, and I said, I just have never met such a wonderful, friendly group of people, and they're just so intelligent and well-groomed. Said it was a nice break from the cows. So I'm thrilled to be here. I can't wait to learn, and I appreciate all of you.
Thank you, Regent Peterson. Now I'll turn it over to President Cross, who also has some introductions.
Thank you, President Bailing. I too have visited Chris's farm and enjoyed the new operations they have with robotics as robotic milkers, and if you get a chance to do that, it's pretty impressive. So, really nice operation. First, I have a couple of updates that I'd like to share. First, Chancellor Kathy Sandeen, our congratulations are in order for Kathy. So she has accepted a position as Chancellor at the University of Alaska in Anchorage, and she'll start about September 15th, so she's with us for a few more months. But I think we all should say congratulations to Kathy, and we wish you the best in your new position, and thank you for all the leadership you've provided while you've been here. So thank you, Kathy. I would also like to update the board on another matter. Holly Hassel, who is the faculty rep from the UW colleges, has accepted a new position at the University of North Dakota State University in Fargo. So since she's originally from Brainerd, it's not too far from Brainerd to Fargo. So congratulations, we'll miss you. Holly, all the best to you. So some introductions. It's my pleasure to welcome Karen Schmidt, UW Systems Interim Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs. Karen succeeds Jim Henderson, who recently retired. Karen has been serving as the Provost and Vice Chancellor for UW colleges, and She brings a unique combination of leadership skills and expertise to this key position, including strategic planning and a commitment to student success, which will be very helpful in this new role, particularly related to restructuring. Karen previously served as Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences and Vice Provost for Research and Sponsored Programs at the University of Alaska Southeast, as well as Dean of the Community and Technical College at the University of Alaska Anchorage. She's also held a number of research and science coordinator manager positions at the University of Washington, at Exxon, and at ITT Antarctic Services. Karen's area of academic expertise is in stratigraphy. I know that sounds funny, but it's the study of strata and layers, and structural geology. She particularly loves to teach geology field courses that take students out of the classroom and provide them with hands-on learning. Karen grew up on a family farm outside of Madison and earned an undergraduate degree in geology and geophysics from UW-Madison. She earned a PhD in geological sciences from Columbia University and a master's in geology from the University of Otago in New Zealand as a Fulbright graduate student fellow. So please join me in welcoming Karen Schmidt. I'm also pleased to introduce Paige Smith, a familiar face in a new role. Paige has agreed to serve as interim vice chancellor for administrative services at the UW-Platteville campus. In this role, Paige will be working closely with senior leadership on the strategic planning and collaborative integration with UW-Richland Center and UW Baraboo-Sauk County. Paige has been a member of the UW system since 2010 when she joined UW Systems Office of General Counsel. For the past 2 years, she served as Chief Institutional Policy and Compliance Officer at UW-Whitewater. We look forward to working with you, Paige, in this new role. Where is Paige? I saw her earlier, so there you go. We also welcome Molly Smith, UW Superior's new Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs. Molly comes to us from St. Martin's University in Washington State, where she served as Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs and Professor of English. She previously held leadership positions at Wheaton College in Massachusetts, Pratham USA, an educational institution in India, Manhattanville College, and Seton Hall University. Molly succeeds Jackie Weisenberger, who has been serving as UW Superior's interim provost since 2016 and will be retiring effective July 1st. So welcome aboard, Molly. Thanks also. And thanks, Jackie, for all your years of service. We wish you the best in your years of retirement, Jackie. Welcome also to Scott Menke, the new Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration at UW-Parkside. Scott will succeed Mel Klinker, who is retiring from the university later this year. Scott, who has been with Parkside for nearly 14 years, is currently the Director of Business Services, Controller, and Budget Officer. He is the first UW-Parkside graduate to hold a senior leadership position at the university. So congratulations, Scott. Please stand. Finally, I'm pleased to introduce another familiar face in a new role. Aaron Brower, currently Provost UW Extension, has agreed to lead the next iteration of CEO-EL as it moves to UW System as Senior Associate Vice President of Academic Affairs and Executive Director of CEO-EL, the home and originator of the UW Flex option. CEO-EL is also home to 15 collaborative degree programs. In fact, every campus in the UW system now collaborates on one or more of these degrees. Aaron has more than 30 years as a professor, program director, and administrator within the UW system. So welcome, Aaron. It's nice to have you here. So. That concludes my introductions, President Behling. Go ahead.
Thank you. At this time, we'd like to officially recognize the service, commitment, and contribution of one of our colleagues, Regent Emeritus Margaret Farrow, Lieutenant Governor Farrow, Regent Farrow, Senator Farrow. I think our friend Margaret has been one of the greatest leaders in our state, and it's always a pleasure to work with her. And more importantly, whenever it's necessary, she serves as a mother to a number of us and always gives us great advice. I'll now call on Regent Michael Grebe to step forward and read the resolution.
Before I read the resolution, it's really a bittersweet privilege, frankly, to have the opportunity to provide a few brief remarks regarding Margaret Farrow's service as a member of the Board of Regents. And I will be brief. While a listing of Margaret's many accomplishments could fill a book, one of her strongest traits is that she does not suffer fools gladly, and the longer I speak, the more opportunity I'll give her to show us what that looks like. Thinking about Margaret's service, there are a few key words and phrases that come readily to mind. The first one is one that, frankly, she probably won't like to hear. Margaret has been a pioneer in many ways. The reason I know she wouldn't like that description is because it could possibly suggest that she was ever anything less than the best suited person for each of the roles she has played in the state of Wisconsin. Not the best woman, the best person. From her service in Elm Grove to the State Assembly to the State Senate, as Lieutenant Governor and as a member of this body, as well as numerous other ventures, Margaret's pioneering role was always less about who she was than what she did and how she did it. Those of us who have had the privilege of working alongside her have witnessed firsthand why she continued to be asked and elected to positions of leadership in our state. Margaret has also been selfless in her service. She was always a public servant with an emphasis on service and not a politician. She never sought to achieve any of the roles she's had for the purpose of advancing her own interests, and her service as a regent exemplifies that selflessness. She accepted the position with no personal agenda, but rather as an opportunity and a recognition that she could make another positive difference on one of the most important institutions in the state, this great university system. She's also recently been a champion for the Wisconsin Eye, which is a perfect representation of her history of serving the citizens of Wisconsin. She pursued that venture because it would make the state a better and more responsive place for all of us. Anytime she speaks with students, she emphasizes the need for each generation to serve locally and for the common good, not for personal aggrandizement. Margaret is also the epitome of a happy warrior. As I noted earlier, she certainly does not suffer fools gladly, but she has also been joyful in her service. From her references to the Capitol building as that wedding cake on State Street, to her delightfully frank commentary, always delivered with a smile and a twinkle in her eye. She has, of course, fought hard, consistently, for what she believes is right and good for the state, but in a positive and upbeat manner that seems too often to be missing in today's environment. One of my favorite things she said about serving as a member of the Board of Regents was that it was actually a lot like being back in the legislature, only with no staff and no pay. Truer words were never said, Margaret. And finally, it is impossible to think of Margaret and not think of her faith in her family. She is, as John pointed out, a devoted wife, mother, and grandmother, a devotion she demonstrates any time she speaks of any of them. As much passion as Margaret has had for the various roles she's played for our state and her countless hours of service, including to this institution, those of us lucky to know her know that those family roles mean more to her than any office, position, award, or acknowledgement. So again, this is a bittersweet moment for all of Margaret's colleagues and friends on the board and throughout the UW system. A former member of the Board of Regents reminded some of us that no matter how vital you think you are, we are all ultimately footprints in the sand. Margaret, yours are very deep and will last a long, long time. It's been an honor for all of us to tell our families that we had the opportunity to serve with Margaret Farrow. You will be missed. Whereas Margaret Farrow dedicated 4.5 years of exemplary service as a regent of the University of Wisconsin system, from June 2013 to December 2017. And whereas Margaret has been a steadfast proponent of maintaining high-quality, affordable public education for UW students, serving on the Education Committee, the Capital Planning and Budget Committee, the Research, Economic Development and Innovation Committee, and the Committee on Student Discipline and other student appeals, including chairing that committee for more than 2 years. And whereas, as chair and member of the Regents Teaching Excellence Awards Committee, Margaret was inspired by the gifted teachers receiving the award and the creative energy and passion for their craft that they share with their students, colleagues, campus community, and beyond. And whereas Margaret served as an effective steward of state and university resources as a member of the Business and Finance Committee, as well as the Audit Committee, including 1 year as the Audit Committee's vice chair. And whereas she served as the Regent member of the Higher Educational Aids Board for more than 2 years as a gubernatorial appointment. And whereas Margaret chaired the Special Regent Committee for UW-Whitewater, the UW-Whitewater Chancellor Search, and also helped select chancellors for UW-Milwaukee, UW-Oshkosh, and UW-Stout. And whereas Margaret brought to the position her extensive experience from her career in government, including as a state representative and senator, as well as the first woman to serve as Wisconsin's lieutenant governor. Be it therefore resolved that the Board of Regents of the University of Wisconsin System commend Margaret Farrow for her distinguished service on behalf of higher education in Wisconsin and wish her well as she spends more time with her husband, family, and grandchildren. Thank you, Margaret. How do we pose with this?
Oh my gosh. I'm not going to be long because I looked at your agenda. Oh my gosh. I will be brief. I want to thank you certainly for this and the kind words. Mike, I really appreciate your reading of those words and the thoughts behind everyone who put something into it. I miss you all. I really do miss you. And I was so looking forward today, except I got 20 minutes. I had a 20-minute traffic snarl as you turned the Marquette interchange, and I was going nuts. So I took a shortcut to get here. It didn't help too much. I want to tell you that I tried to reach Chuck Pruitt, and I wasn't able to, because I really wanted him to write my speech. And that's an inside joke for the new people here you don't know. But Chuck Pruitt several years ago delivered a farewell talk that knocked us all off our seats. He was so eloquent. I'm not going to be eloquent. I'm going to be very emotional, because what I'm going to say comes from my heart. The students are the whole reason we're here. Anything you're doing isn't about your prestige, about this institution's prestige. It's what have you done for the students lately. And I don't mean in a coddling snowflake way. I mean in a tough, learn responsibility, learn the facts, and go out and change the world way. And so I feel so strongly about that. That's what's motivated me through most of my life, quite frankly. And by the way, the family who told me I had to get off this position because of my little heart thing last August, They were cowards. They didn't show up today. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. They all had really good reasons for not being able to be here. And so, but I knew I had to put a little dig in. And if you knew my 5 sons and husband John, they have a wicked sense of humor, so they'll understand. But I mean it. There is so much to be done for our students, and it's in your hands now to do it in every way possible. Because if they succeed, guess what? Our state succeeds. And this is the message you've heard me say till I'm blue in the face to them. I guess I missed one thing I really wanted to do, so I'm going to throw it all out to you now with all of your very capable hands, and thank you all for serving in this capacity, especially the 2 new ones who have come on. It's a big thing to take on, and I wish you well, I really do. But as you look at the various things, beginning with the budget, which I understand you're going to have a view of today again, and God bless. I'm going to interject right now what I was going to say later. If anyone doubts what I think of Ray Cross, they haven't been around this place for the last 4 years. He is such a marvelous leader for this system, and I want all of you to give him every bit of cooperation. I was on his selection committee too, and by golly, I'm glad we chose him because he is just doing so much and bringing so much reality to the world because he's an engineer, which was you have to know my husband's an engineer, so I'm biased. But I really, really want you all to continue to cooperate. And he's open to criticism, I know, but cooperate with him and bring things forward. Because as you look at all these campuses, and you look at the diverse things that are going on, nobody can get their hands around it completely. I mean, I served 16 years in that building that you're right, that I say is treated almost like a wedding cake and whatever. And I was on joint finance for 2 sessions. I didn't know what I should have known, and I'm not dumb. And I did my homework, and I read all the papers, and I talked to people. You have got to, I'm talking to everyone in this room now, but especially our regents, you've got to be sure you talk to the legislators, and don't let them think a 1-paragraph summary of something is going to give them what they need to know about it. You've got to make it real for them. You've got to let them know the people involved if things don't succeed. So we've got to make sure that we follow Ray, that you all follow the messages you have. I cannot tell you, I talk. Mike kind of alluded to that. I blow horns. I've been blowing your horns, the 2nd and 3rd row over there. I am so proud of our various institutions and campuses. And no matter what meeting I'm at, some one of you or all of you get mixed into it because I don't think people in this state have any idea what we have. I didn't know how wonderful it was. And as you heard at my first meeting of introduction, I graduated from Marquette. How was I supposed to know? And my husband was from Chicago. How was he supposed to know? So I mean it so sincerely that you've got to make sure, and now I'm talking to the chancellors, make sure in friendly ways, smiling a lot, giving deference, you get those legislators to know you and to know your needs, to meet your students, and to serve the need they have for good knowledge about you. And I can't implore you enough to do that. I truly mean it. But let me get back to my one last point that I really want to make. The thing I didn't do that I'm upset about, and I found out at my first visit to La Crosse, sitting in a room of faculty members, after I just found out that Lovell was leaving here and going to Marquette. That was an interesting morning. But anyway, so I'm sitting in this meeting, and suddenly one of the members said, well, you know, we just lost this marvelous professor to Iowa. And I said, why? And they said, well, they have really good tuition remission in Iowa for faculty members. And I stupidly said, well, I said it, but I showed how stupid I was. We don't have that here? No. Every school I had ever known about or had any information or relationship with had tuition remission of some kind for the kids of the faculty. We don't have this in the system. Even if we begin with a nickel, begin it. It shows to me, I think, such a belief in the family and in keeping our families, faculty families together, keeping their kids going where they want them to go. And you have to argue about, should it be to just the school, the faculty members at, or should it to be any one of our wonderful schools in the system? Right now, if I don't have to pay the check, I'd say, well, put it wide open. But I truly wish you wouldn't forget that, because I think it's so important to reinforce the belief in our campuses. And I guess the last thing I want to say to you is, again, from the heart. I don't go to within 10 feet of a high school or college student these days, and this has been going on for a long time, but it was reinforced when I was here those 4.5 years, without saying to them, you can find somewhere in Wisconsin to get the best education no matter what area you're trying to study. Anything. And they'll kind of look at me, and then I'll say, so look for them. And then the next thing I'll say is, and when you're finished with that, you darn well better stay in Wisconsin and build our future, because you are the future. I said that once at Eau Claire, before you were there, Jim. I was up there when I was in the legislature, and I was talking to a bunch of kids. And at the end of my talk, I said, you are the future of this state. You have a responsibility to us. This kid came up to me afterwards that looked like he just fell out of bed. It was an early morning meeting. And he had this kind of stunned look on his face, and he said, I think I was a senator then. He said, Senator, nobody ever told me that. Nobody ever told me I had the responsibility to be the future of the state. I said, well, you are. And he said, that's cool. I'd love to know where that kid is now. But my point is, we have to tell them that. We'd have to tell them they're needed, they're wanted. The economy in this state, I believe in the next 10 years, for all the reasons we're reading in headlines, is going right up through the ceiling. But you all, and I know the ones right close to Foxconn, Chancellor Ford, I mean, it's amazing. You've jumped right in and you're right there, and Chancellor Money and all the other schools in this area. But it's going to be the whole state it's going to impact. And I do believe it's going to impact us in a positive growth way. Our economy, we're going to become not Silicon Valley, not the Carolinas Triangle. We're becoming whatever you want to call it, but it's going to happen here. We've got the greatest abundance of fresh water that we're carefully protecting, and we've got the greatest opportunity to grow. So tell those kids, wherever they are, even on your campuses, they've got to stay here. The last thing I did at Eau Claire last year, I was at the breakfast for the students on the second day of the chancellor meeting, and all these fine-looking young men were standing there waiting to politely meet me. And I was the first regent. This is a miracle. I was the first regent at the breakfast. You have to know I'm not a morning person, so that was a miracle. So I'm in the room, and the kids come in, and they are just a super bunch of young people. And they're all, and I said, where are you from? Minnesota, Minnesota, Minnesota. And they're going on about Minnesota. And I looked at all of them afterwards, and I said, well, you can't go back. And it was too early in the morning to lay that on them. They all look, what? And I said, no, you have just benefited from all this good Wisconsin investment in you, and we need you to build our future. I just said that to another kid, and he said, but I've got an internship in Illinois. And I said, makes no difference. The job's going to be better here when you're finished. I'm serious. Please, as I say goodbye, push hard, because I'm still out there doing it, that our kids realize why all of you in this room are working so hard to create a marvelous education system, because we need them to take advantage of it and then to be back here building, and some of them may be on the Board of Regents 20, 30, 40 years from now. God bless you all. I miss you terribly, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Moving on to item number 5 on our agenda, the restructuring update. President Cross, if you could please provide our requested annual update regarding restructuring.
Thank you, Regent President Bailing. We're now less than a month away from July 1st and the official start date of the reporting structure changing for the UW Colleges and Extension. And I am pleased to report we're on track. We're on time and we are ready to deliver. Late last week, we received a letter from the Higher Learning Commission, HLC, our accrediting body, including its summary report on the UW system's requested change of control, structure, or organization. While this is not yet the final report, its preliminary conclusions are encouraging. It suggests that our proposal generally meets the expectations of HLC and that our institutions, following restructuring, would continue to meet HLC's criteria for accreditation. We expect to hear HLC's official decision later this month when the Commission's Board of Trustees meets to consider our application and the findings of the summary report. In the meantime, a lot of people are continuing to invest a great deal of thought and energy into making this project a success. So there are several key transition activities that we are focusing on. So first, we must change the reporting structure for colleges and university extension employees. We must reconfigure the Student Information Services system, and we must launch the revised eApp. A little bit more about each of those. First, the reporting structure of the UW Colleges changes obviously on July 1st. So the HR, or Human Resources, functional team has been working diligently to ensure a smooth transition. In coming days, receiving institutions will send transitioning employees detailed letters on their individual transition, including their title, new department or division, their supervisor, tenure and rank for faculty members, and orientation information. This follows a series of town hall meetings and other communications to clarify the transfer of benefits, governing policies, and HR services. Tomorrow, when the Education Committee reports, the regents will be asked to memorialize the transfer of UW College's faculty to the receiving institutions in a board resolution. Regents will be asked to consider the creation of new colleges at UW-Milwaukee and UW-Whitewater, in part to address transitioning tenure, as well as a name change request from UW-Eau Claire. A second key transition activity is the necessary reconfiguration of the student information system. Technical support staff have been working hard to prepare for the conversion of data from UW College's current PRISM system to the student information systems at receiving institutions. This data includes student biographic and demographic information, admissions data, and student enrollment history. It is no small task. All of this information must be up to date to ensure students' financial aid is ready for 2019-20. They can register for courses in 2019-20 this fall, and they are billed the appropriate tuition rates as the academic and tuition structures for 2019-20 are being finalized and developed. Our goal is aggressive. We're hoping to have the preliminary work completed by August 1st in order to provide continuity of services, remember that term, with as little disruption to the student experience as possible during this transition. Third, the eApp, we call it the eApp, redesign task force is on track to launch a revised eApp in time for the 2019-20 application cycle, which opens August 1st. A key goal of the redesign is to allow students to apply to multiple institutions, UW institutions, through one set of application materials. Admissions directors from across the UW system have met and agreed to 23 core application processes, as well as removing a quarter of the existing questions on admissions applications. This will make applying to UW easier and more efficient. A pause and for a point of reference, currently it takes the average student or the average applicant about 40 minutes to complete our application. All of our competitors are under 20 minutes. Work has also been completed to push applications from students seeking admission to two-year institutions to the receiving institutions for review and processing. As with any organization going through significant structural change, a decline in sales, or in this case, enrollments, is usually expected at first. We recognize that restructuring may have caused uncertainty among prospective students about the future of the two-year campuses and delayed their applications. During this transitional period of restructuring, we want to reassure prospective students that all campuses remain open and encourage them to apply and enroll. So, to further encourage these applications, effective today, the UW system is waiving application fees for all students applying to any of the 13 two-year college campuses for the remainder of the fall term, and this will remain in place until September the 7th. It is also important during this transition phase that the process of awarding student financial aid at the two-year institutions is protected and preserved so that students get the resources they need. Turning to long-term plans, many functions will continue to be provided centrally for the first year of the restructuring project, that is through June of 2019, to ensure continuity of operations for students and employees. In phase 2 of restructuring, starting in July of 2019, the four-year receiving institutions will take on more operational planning, and their centralized services will be integrated into the two-year campuses. About the same time, certain functions in the areas of human resources, information technology, and procurement will begin to be provided as shared services within the system. This advances the core initiative, our commitment to operational reform and excellence, which is a key element of the 2020 Forward Strategic Framework. The services will be provided by UW Shared Services, a consolidated administrative service organization that may offer opportunities for cost reduction, greater efficiencies, and better service through process standardization, consolidation, and streamlining. The focus of UW Shared Services will be the comprehensive campuses. Payroll, benefits processing, and background checks are likely candidates for initial services within human resources. Application hosting, network services, and disaster recovery will be assessed for possible inclusion in information technology. Contract administration, bid administration, and procurement training may be part of the procurement services. A customer council, let me repeat that, a customer council will be established from the comprehensive campuses to guide the shared services and help set service needs, while holding UW Shared Services Group accountable to those to whom they provide services. Some additional restructuring efforts to come before the board include the fiscal year 2019 budget. You'll see that tomorrow, which will be presented tomorrow by Vice President Sean Nelson. Pending HLC approval, the budget informs pro forma budgets for the 7 receiving institutions that map the current fiscal year resources from the UW colleges to their respective receiving institutions or regions. So before closing, I would like to acknowledge the dedication and hard work that has been invested in this restructuring by so many people. Without their work, this project would not be possible. So thank you. Many of them are not here, they're listening hopefully online, but we really are appreciative of that. Finally, at our last meeting, we had an opportunity to hear directly from the chancellors of most of the receiving institutions about their restructuring experiences. Today, we will hear from Chancellor Blank, who will provide an update on the transition of UW Extension units, including cooperative extension, the conference centers, mail services, the Department of Labor Education, and Wisconsin Public Television and Wisconsin Public Radio to UW-Madison. You should also be aware that extension is not on the timelines and doesn't face an academic calendar issue. nor does it have HLC accreditation issues. So this is going a little differently. So Chancellor Blank, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Ray. I appreciate the chance to say a few words about what we're doing at UW-Madison to bring all of the extension units that we're acquiring into our presence. You should all have a copy of the slides I'm going to show you, if you prefer to look at that as opposed to the big screen. This is the list of the groups that we're acquiring: Cooperative Extension, Wisconsin Public TV, and Wisconsin Public Radio. They are going to come into a new division at UW-Madison that will sit under the Office of the Provost. They will each stay, in there as their own unit, but then to combine together into a larger comprehensive division. The conference centers and the mail services will go under the Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration, and the relatively small unit, the Department of Labor Education, will be folding into the Department of Continuing Studies. Just to give you a sense of how big this is not a small set of units. We're talking about almost 1,000 employees, 808 full-time employees, 150 part-time employees, and over $100 million in funds that flow through these units. Perhaps most mind-boggling to me was the fact that we're talking about over 35,000 volunteers who work with these units. And you can imagine some of the issues that arise when you're talking about that number of volunteers and the wide range of things that they do. We've been taking as organized an approach to this as possible, and I want to recognize Provost Sarah Mangelsdorf and particularly Casey Nagy, who has been the special assistant in charge of this transition and has really organized this and operated, and they're both sitting there and are available to answer questions. Casey has set up a number of things, a joint steering team that includes both people from our campus and from the various groups we're taking in. Underneath that steering team, there are 9 working groups covering all of the different issues we have to deal with. You can see the list: HRIT, finance, facilities, auxiliary services, public media, volunteers, risk management, and communications. And then there's always some set of things that come up that don't fit in any of those. And then the governance groups have been meeting together between our campus and the extension units as well. And between our campus and other units, we've had over 250 people involved in the planning and execution of this, and we've needed them, I'll say, as you'll see, as we talk about the complexities involved. Just to remind you of what these units are and what they do very quickly: Cooperative Extension has over 600 full-time employees and almost all of the part-time employees that are coming in. And then there are additional 100-plus faculty who are on our campuses. I think about 80% of them at Madison, the other 20% in Platteville, Stevens Point, and River Falls, who are faculty and then have joint appointments with Extension. Cooperative Extension has a presence in all 72 counties and 3 tribal partners and has lots of those volunteers. Their budget is $68 million. They have almost half of it coming from state GPR. So given the budget cuts of certainly the last 5 years and the last 10 years, that they've really taken a hit on budgets, and we'll come back to that and some of the restructuring that's required. The USDA give them about 20% of their dollars, counties give them about 18%, and then their federal grants that they receive. So they have quite a dispersed set of sources for their budget. They do a lot of things, and many of you know something about Cooperative Extension. It's everything from the 4-H program. One of the things we're acquiring is the 4-H camp at Upham Woods, and I'm going to recommend the Board of Regents bring your sleeping bags and meet there for your next meeting. That will be fun. They do a lot of agricultural work. Obviously, that is where they started in terms of Cooperative Extension. A lot of work on natural resources, really interesting family education and outreach work, and similarly, a lot of work with community leadership on economic development. The next group that's coming in is Public TV and Radio, and I went too far there. They have about 250 employees. We are going to be acquiring 32 radio transmitters and 6 television stations, as well as a lot of other transmission equipment. In addition to what you know of as Public TV and Radio, they do a lot of other educational programming as well that goes out to the K-12 schools. And they report to both the Educational Communications Board and will be reporting to us, and that's sort of shared responsibility for much of their work. And they also have a lot of volunteers involved in their work. Their budget is around 27 million, and they also have quite a wide range of funding. About a third comes from state GPR dollars, about 28% comes from federal dollars through this Educational Communications Board in the state. And then they have been very actively involved as their federal dollars in particular have shrunk, and then in more recent years as their state dollars have shrunk, they have moved into fundraising quite extensively. So their endowment income, together with their annual gifts, is more than a third of their budget. And part of, I think, the advantage of them coming into UW-Madison is we obviously also have a very extensive development operation, and I think these groups can work together very well. Then, finally, in addition to public TV and radio, we're taking in the conference centers and mailing services, 65 employees. We get a hotel, the Pyle Center that many of you have been at. They do all the bulk mailing services for the system, for UW-Madison, for a few other groups. The majority of their money comes from their auxiliary operations, which they get paid for, but they also have a significant amount of GPR, 36% of their budget, and then some other sources of money as well. To give you a sense of the complexity of this, the smallest group here is the extension and conference centers and the mail services, and we are going to fully transition them by the 1st of July. This is what the timeline for the last 4 months that Casey has been running has looked like. And I don't expect you to read this through in detail, but I want to give you a sense of the complexity of these transitions. Every item on this involves multiple people, multiple units, changes in systems in a number of cases. It's a major amount of work. We are, I believe, largely on time and on track on these changes. This slide was printed a little earlier, so it hasn't turned green in the month of May. But getting them into UW-Madison fully and completely by July 1st has meant an enormous amount of work, and that's the small unit. As a result of that, we have 2 transitions here. July 1st, coming up in less than a month, is the first one. As of July 1st, the senior leadership in all of these units will transfer to UW-Madison. We are also in the midst of writing MOUs with the system for all of these because the other employees will not yet transfer for a variety of reasons. We do not have the coordinated systems in place. So we're going to have MOUs that essentially give us operational control over these units, the direct report of their senior leadership, but the employees will continue to be employees of the system and not of us. As I noted, the conference center and mailing services will completely transfer, and we are in the midst of working with the policies and procedures. Most of the policies and procedures in place will stay in place, so they will continue to operate as they have been operating. Then over the next year, as we work through all of the details on these very large units, we will slowly move towards a full transition, and the idea is that we will have a full transition of all employees no later than a year from now, July 1st, 2019, sooner if we can make it work. We've got a lot of issues identified by working groups that have to be resolved, and particularly around payroll and the change of a lot of employees who have a very different set of job descriptions and jobs than many of the employees at UW-Madison right now. So the sort of challenges that we're facing is, first of all, in cooperative extension, as I think all of you know, they have been facing really major budget cuts for quite a while. And as a result, 2 years ago, they launched a complete restructuring called their NEXT program. That restructuring has resulted in much more coordination in how they serve the counties. So rather than having an extension personnel in every county, they're having extension personnel who serve multiple counties but are more specialized. So you might have a family services person working with 3 counties. You might have an ag person working with 2 other counties. So they've been through a major reorganization that is not yet complete. They are still in the midst of finishing that organization at the same time that we're now coming into this major transition. And that's a real challenge for them, and we've tried to be quite aware of the fact that we're asking a lot, and it's one reason why we're moving with all due speed, but not pushing ahead as fast as one possibly could, because there's only so much you can get done, and they do need to complete that other reorganization. While both cooperative extension as well as public media, both TV and radio, were started at Madison, lived at Madison for more than 50 years, they have been in a separate unit now for 50 years. And 50 years is a long time in terms of building up a whole different culture, a whole different set of systems, a whole different set of ways of doing business. And, you know, coming into compliance in terms of policies and contracting procedures and common systems is simply going to take some period of time. And we'd like to do that deliberatively and make it work rather than do it too fast. There's variation in compensation and benefits. All of these units have people across the state. UW-Madison is largely in Madison, and there are obviously differences in pay expectations and markets, and we need to work all that through. It's good this titling and compensation survey is going on at the same time. And then we have very different HR systems. The HR working group has identified over 50 policies and processes that are going to have to come into an alignment for these groups to you know, fully be coordinated. I could go on and mention other things. There's naming issues, there are development issues of fundraising. Back at the, probably about 4 or 5 months ago, I had the, my regular Chancellor's Advisory Board. Some of the regents sit on that, my regent buddies. But we also have a number of people who've been CEOs or senior leaders in very large, in most cases, international organizations. And one of the things I asked that board of is, many of you have been through mergers and acquisitions in your private enterprise as CEOs. What did you learn that we need to know about this particular merger and transition? And the very first thing that every one of them said unambiguously was, don't change anything immediately that you don't have to change. Don't give people the sense you're taking them over. You know, change the things you absolutely have to, but then take time to talk and collaborate and to move forward with more deliberate speed on places where you've got that time available. So, you know, we were already designing the signs that were going to say Cooperative Extension UW-Madison and where we were going to put them, and, you know, we put that on hold, given that advice, which I think was very good advice, to make this a more collaborative process as we move forward. So, you know, and I think we somewhat changed our timetable and our approach as a result of that conversation. So there are challenges, but I should say there's enormous opportunities in this. I am absolutely delighted with the opportunity to bring these units into the operational auspices of UW-Madison, not only because we've had long historical affiliations with these units, but I really think that if we do this right, once we get through all the processes and systems and details, we are going to be able to strengthen all of the units involved. And on the one hand, I'm hoping that a closer affiliation through us with some of our educational and research programs gives greater substance and new opportunities for both public media as well as for Cooperative Extension and their work out around the state. On the other hand, while we do have presence across the state, this gives us much greater presence and gives us the opportunity to listen better and to be more connected with a whole range of issues across the state as well. And, you know, my goal in all of this is to end up in a win-win situation, that when we come back and look at this 3 years from now, 5 years from now, we will say, but of course, you know, they should have been there all along. This is a much better configuration, and all units are better because of this change. And that's what we're aiming for. So let me stop there, open it up for questions. Casey is the point person for any of this. Do you or Sarah want to add anything to what I've said? All right. Questions?
Thank you for their presentation. What feedback are you getting from the counties, because they contribute significantly to Cooperative Extension?
Yeah. I'm going to go down and sit down here with them so you can look at all of us.
As you might have discerned from some of the recent media coverage, there are a couple components to a response. One is there's apprehension generally about what this might mean, and so we've put significant effort into corresponding with county partners and county executives about our intentions to simply further the activities of Cooperative Extension and not disassemble or disaggregate or change it in any particular way, but that we were looking to create new synergies and, as Chancellor Blank indicated, find new ways to populate what they're currently doing with some of the benefits of the research going on in Madison. So we've had that kind of dialogue. There are some residual issues that have received recent publicity with respect to the counties and some of the commitments made to resource their various needs that overextended some of the abilities of cooperative extension to actually fulfill. And so that's resulted in a dialogue, in particular in a certain number of counties, about how best to respond to that particular situation. And with respect to how that all originated, I won't go into the details, but as we bring new eyes through this transitional process to the way cooperative extension is doing business, we're looking at ways to avoid recurrence of this kind of processual difficulty. So what we're seeing aired in the media today, I expect not to recur next year.
And I should say, we basically have acquired the county executives as a whole new set of stakeholders at UW-Madison. And I met with them in their annual meeting. I've tried to, when I go around the state, to be meeting with the county execs in addition to the other folks that I've traditionally met with. And they're still worried about this whole restructuring that started 2 to 3 years ago and is not yet complete. And Extension has to deliver on that and show that it can serve the counties effectively in this restructured mode. And we're obviously going to be working closely with that over the next several years and making sure that happens. But, there are definitely challenges around it.
Regents, other questions for the Chancellor? Regent Whitburn.
Just clarification on where we're at. Are these components now going to be under your cognizance in 3 weeks?
We will fully take all employees in the mailing services and conference centers. We will bring the senior leadership into UW-Madison employees, and signing MOUs with the system will have operational authority over those units, even though the employees will not yet have transferred. So operationally,
July
yes,
1.
they will be under our auspices.
Wonderful.
Any other questions, Regents? Seeing none, let's give a round of applause to Chancellor Blank and her staff. At this time, we'll turn to item number 6 on our agenda to hear a presentation by our hosting Chancellor, Chancellor Mone. Chancellor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Regent President Belling. Regents, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody, to UW-Milwaukee. It's wonderful to have you here again. Each of our UW system institutions offers significant impact to the different locations for our different regions. I'm delighted to share with you today UW-Milwaukee's unique qualities and give you an update on the progress of our work. The first thing that I'm going to do is share a little bit of background, and then as the title suggests, I'll talk about some of the principles that underlie everything that we do, the progress that we've made since I've reported last, and the partnerships, and I'd like to tie all those together. First, some background on UW-Milwaukee. Given some of the different presentations that have been made today, many of these facts have been shared, and depending on which subcommittee you've been in, you've seen an awful lot of these, so I won't go through them in detail. There's some important numbers up there, and one in particular is at the top. We are the only public urban research access university located in such a large metropolitan area. And what that means, and what many of these other statistics add up to, as I stand back and I look at this, is I think about, first of all, the Research One quality, what that means in terms of the faculty, what that means in terms of the quality of the education that is provided at UWM. But I also think about the access mission that's so vitally important, given the diversity of the population that we serve and the mission as chartered in the UW System Charter for UW-Milwaukee. It's unique in that sense that we are really pursuing both of those simultaneously. And I would say that it's a mutually reinforcing mission that we have excelled at in terms of the things that I'll talk about today. So the significant diversity of the population and our students. We transform lives and we power partnerships in remarkable ways, which I'm going to share with you today. I'd like to also highlight a few best-kept secrets, some of the things that you probably haven't seen in this particular format before, and I'll not read all of these to you, but just a few highlights. There's so many more. The College of Nursing here at UWM consistently ranks, depending on if it's the undergraduate, master's, or nursing, in the top 10 to 15%, largest nursing program in the state. But I'm going to say this an awful lot for every great thing that I say about our UW system institutions. It is not enough. I can talk about being the largest business school in the state in terms of graduates. Over 1,000 graduates a year, but it is not enough. And I can go on and talk about top 20 film. Maybe it's enough, but it's pretty darn high. We're the only architecture program in the state, bouncing around here. In the middle, top 25 list, not 25%. This is top 25 LGBT safe, supportive, friendly environments. The veterans box in the lower left-hand quarter actually is an understatement. The 1,086 veterans that are on our campus are only those that are supported by the GI Bill. We, in fact, have over 1,500 students, and we were recently, last month, recognized as a military silver level friendly campus. So we're on our way to becoming gold status. So a number of different highlights that are there in terms of some of the best kept secrets. What I'd like to do now is share with you some principles that underlie virtually everything that we do. Obviously, I'm going to start with some of the aspects that we've been drilling into, what you've heard throughout a lot of the different activities, a lot of the different presentations today. It's around accountability and efficiency, or stated differently, the importance of stewardship. Like all of UW system, and frankly, like much of higher education today, budgets are challenging, enrollments are challenging, the cost of technology, the cost of change, tremendous challenges facing higher education. But I think it's fair to say that we've had remarkable fiscal responsibility, having trimmed what we've trimmed in a very quick period. We've done this with a great team. We've done this with a great team of faculty, staff, involving governance, involving leadership, and working in a very collaborative manner. I'm quite proud of how we've accomplished this. On the efficiency, I'm going to give you a few examples. One of them in the middle there talks about our integrated support services. We're in the process right now, in fact, it'll happen on June 11th, is the official rollout of our first hub around integrated shared support services. And what we have is IT, procurement, HR, and our IT functions that are working, and we're going to ultimately have 3 hubs that'll be much more efficient. There'll be great cost savings involved, but ultimately even better services. This is something that's consistent with the core initiatives that are part of the UW System strategic plan. I'm also going to talk throughout my talk today about strategic focuses on our investment priorities. And let me give you an example of one right now, and it deals with the stewardship associated with our strategic enrollment management plan. We have a plan that we developed, and we're in the implementation stages, and it was the first time our campus has undertaken a strategic enrollment management plan. And this is coordinated action across the campus to grow enrollment and retention, leading to more effective graduation rates. We've invested $1.1 million in very targeted areas on an annual basis. The progress in our first year is an increase in first to second year retention rate of over 1%, first year retention rate of African American males of over 6%, and recruitment of Illinois freshmen of over 31% growth. We're on a pace to grow our freshmen and Illinois recruitments even more dramatically in future years. One of the comments that I'd make about any efforts to undertake enrollment and graduation changes is that it takes a long time. It's just an elongated process. So we're pretty pleased with the process so far. So that's the first principle. The second one envelops a lot of different guiding values. These were established on our campus in 2013, and why they're so important is they're not just simply words, but we really try to live these, and we try to bring these to life. To reinforce these guiding values, this year we started a stronger campaign where we have monthly messages, videos, and things that we bring to life and engage the campus around guiding values. I'll share with you just a couple of these. One of them deals with diversity, or more broadly, diversity and inclusion, which is valued and important for our campus. We've been working to change the campus culture, not just from the employee perspective, but to help create the culture that our students know that the next generation of workforce must embrace diversity and inclusion as a common practice. I will have a Chancellor's Diversity and Inclusion Council that's forming right now, and it will encompass all the different activities we have across administration, schools, and colleges to bring together an actual focus, reporting out quarterly to me, as well as a speaker series that's being developed right now. We have online diversity and inclusion training that is in the works with new modules every year. So we really focus on bringing those things to life. Many of you, regents, many in the community have participated in something that's part of our second guiding value that I'll mention, which is around inquiry, open inquiry, the Freedom of Expression series. So you might recall last fall when we had Clarence Page from the Chicago Tribune, Washington Week. He is a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and speaker who came in and really talked about fundamental issues along with a panel of UWM faculty, students, and had great community interest. We continued that series with Jeffrey Stone from the University of Chicago. He's a prominent author. He speaks an awful lot on the First Amendment, and his comments were around protest and protected speech. And then we finished the series this year dealing with all the issues that are involved with free speech and social media, which, as you can appreciate, is quite an important topic. The point of these is that through education and through expected behaviors being modeled and talked about, we can be respectful, we can have much more open dialogue and engage in a polarized society to bring together much more coherence, to allow both sides to engage in respectful, collegial manners. So those are a couple of the guiding values that I would stress. The third principle is around sexual misconduct. Preventing such behavior on our campus is such an important priority. I and the members of my leadership team, and I think you would say anybody in administration, governance, and leadership positions on our campus are committed to zero tolerance for sexual misconduct. This is simply too important not to take as seriously as we can. We've had all employees and our student workers complete online training in the last year, and that's just a start to help raise awareness of sexual violence and harassment. We provided training for all of our students this year and refresher training for ongoing students. We're committed on this campus to having a safe, appropriate, and supportive environment. So those are some of the bedrock principles, if you will, some of the things that shape what we do. I'd now like to give a quick update on some of the positive progress and then further updates on some of the things that I've shared with you in the past. The first, and you're the first to hear this publicly, is that our campus is the first in Wisconsin and one of only a little more than 20% across the country to have received Innovation and Economic Prosperity designation from the American Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities. This is a significant accomplishment. We have tried to receive this in the past in terms of recognition, and we have achieved this now. So we feel that this is representative of the types of engagement that we do, and it's a great feather in our cap. We are able to announce this now, but we will actually be having public recognition, and it'll be nationally part of a larger press release later this fall. We have addressed food insecurity, which you may know nationally is a huge challenge. When there's been surveys of most academic institutions, you find anywhere from 1/3 to half of our students that have food insecurity. We have both a mobile food pantry and a dedicated food pantry in this building, and then we have a partnership with Pick and Save grocery stores where once a week we have either a semi-trailer or a small truck that comes in and delivers for all of our campus and community population seriously discounted food opportunities. So it's great to be addressing that. And our Student Association has really taken a lead. Over the last several years, we have maintained the accreditation, not only for the campus-wide Higher Learning Commission accreditation, but for every single program that has gone up for accreditation. Last week, we heard from the College of Nursing accreditation body, we have the full 10 years of accreditation. About 2 months ago, we heard from the Lubar School of Business that the accrediting body, when we had the exit interview, we heard for the first time ever the kinds of comments about the strength of what we've been able to do and how positive the review has been, hearing from the incoming president of the AACSB, the kudos that were accomplished. So this, I think, speaks to a number of great qualities. So a lot of excellence there. And then at a large level, you've heard some references to this throughout some of the different comments. I'm very pleased to report that our original goal for our campaign called Made in Milwaukee, Shaping the World was $175 million. Last fall, we raised that to $200 million, and I'm happy to report that this month we will achieve that, and we will finish the campaign in 2019, June, and we will look to finish as strongly as possible. And I'm not putting numbers on that yet, but I can just say that I'm pretty confident we'll continue to exceed this. Why is this important? Biggest reason is what Regent Emeritus Farrow talked about is primarily, fundamentally about student support. In fact, almost 60% of the campaign is around scholarships. And that is going to be something I'll talk about later in terms of how important that is for our students and the cost of education today to be able to be supported. You can see from the pie chart, we also have focus on research excellence. We must continue to support that through faculty, graduate student fellowships, support for equipment, the types of things that it takes because research is very expensive. And then the remainder is around community engagement. So we're very, very proud of this progress and immensely grateful for the tremendous support for the people who believe in this campus. Now I'm going to go through the strategic opportunities and updates on those in 3 areas. This is the framework that I shared with you last June. If you've heard from both Provost Britz and Vice Chancellor Van Harpen in other presentations, you've seen this framework, and they've talked about different elements of it. As a quick review, there's 3 major components. The first is around students. How do we create an outstanding learning environment? What does that mean? Second, we'll talk about research. Third, we'll talk about community engagement and building the talent pipeline. In the first area, outstanding learning environment, what's involved here is, obviously the educational pipeline that reaches back to K-12 linkages, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but it also deals with how do we ensure student success around graduation and what are the building blocks. Our provost and many individuals in academic affairs would tell you there's about 70 to 75 different activities campuses can engage in to affect this. We're really trying to focus with laser-like intensity on those areas. So for example, our Summer Bridge program, we've had a 25% increase in students who are taking real intense focus on the mathematics or learning around reading and literacy programs to help them succeed. We have a comprehensive student success network. We have implemented meta majors and we're pairing intensive, invasive advising around that. In the career planning leadership area, I'm happy to report that we have just as a strong example in our student affairs IT services, we have a number of programs that are involved there in STEM, business innovation and design, and 100% of those students are hired within 6 months of graduation. We're also undertaking efforts to become a Hispanic serving institution. Today we're at about 11% in terms of that number of our student body. So why does this matter? Obviously it's around retention and graduation, it's success after graduation, and we've been able through these efforts to increase our retention, first to second year retention, over 1% each of the last 4 years. So we're at basically about 4.25% for the last 4 years, which is substantial given how this means great things for future graduation rates. The achievement gap that faces Wisconsin, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, but this state occupies state position number 50 out of 50 states for having the most challenged achievement gap from high schools across the country. We serve a population that has, whether it's because of financial or academic preparation, significant challenges. So our goal is to bring that as close to zero as we can, and we're having a retreat next month toward zero achievement gap and reducing that completely. We have a 7-point plan that we've implemented over the last several years, and we have last fall achieved a 6 percentage point closure for African American males. This is vitally important. I'd like to tell you something that's foundational about that. Some of you might remember when we had the Regents meeting in Oshkosh and then another one in years ago, it was 4 or 5 years ago in Oshkosh, and then after that in Stevens Point. At that time, UWM made presentations about some of the things that we were going to implement. And I'm happy to tell you, this many years later, here's where we are today. We've undertaken such significant math reforms. We're leading and partnering with two-year colleges. We're partnering with a number of different organizations, technical colleges. Before those math reforms in 2014, only 24% of our students completed their college credit for math in the first year. Today, more than 50% complete credit-bearing math in their first year. We accelerate through that the time to degree. Let me give you a dramatic example of this. It used to take a 3-semester sequence for which students were paying for them to get through to complete credit-bearing math. We today have differentiated pathways. We have co-requisite programming, intensive advising, the Summer Bridge program, and many other things that allow students, instead of taking 3 semesters, to do this in 1 semester. And it's so powerful that we've seen an 83% increase in the success rate for students enrolled, those that enroll, and most of them do, in this co-requisite course. But let's talk back to the achievement gap. When we talk about outstanding learning environment, what our responsibility is. We have both African American and Latino students today that prior to the change, as we look now where we are, they're 4 times more likely to complete remedial math in their first year. This is huge. This is so foundational. I can't begin to stress how critical that is for student success in so many other areas. So the completion rate has more than doubled post-reform, independent of ethnicity. So for all of our students, it's just been a dramatic increase. So bottom line, we're increasing the success rate and, importantly, shortening the time needed for students to complete their remedial math and the gateway credit-bearing courses. So that's our outstanding learning environment. Progress in a second area is around exceptional research. What's involved with this? Well, a number of targeted areas. I think Provost Britz, in your report, it was a 21-page report that we have involving over 100 meetings to continue to build on, reinforce the research one that we have. Not just maintain, not just retain, but to build on and strengthen this. Some of the specific activities that we've engaged in. Well, we are focusing our work on research directions, collaborations in the College of Letters and Science, in our health schools, in a number of different areas involving different targeted areas. We have allocated $1.5 million new base funding to faculty retention salaries in those most important areas. We've had workshops on cluster collaborative research, and we've infused multiple rounds of collaborative research team development awards to focus research in different areas. We've also engaged in strategies to attract and retain our graduate students, those in TA, RA, PA stipends. We've invested over $1 million over the last 2 years in terms of changing the budget to better support them, because that's so fundamental to our future work. And then growing undergraduate research. So standing back, why does this matter? Well, it's about increasing our reach. It's about having greater impact and building on R1. Specifically, if we think about real-world problems, the types of things in health, the types of issues that are so prominent in the news today, we see opioid addiction. You know, every family member, myself, cancer is not far away from many of us. Issues around diabetes, dementia, Alzheimer's. We have researchers collaboratively working on those types of issues, making life-saving, life-impacting differences all of the time. Activities underway throughout this campus. When we think about the environment, we think about the health of the Great Lakes. We think about beaches that are able to be used because our researchers have helped bring beaches back to life. We think about the agricultural quality and the importance for livestock and the importance in this state for the quality of water and the abundance of water. We're doing research in those types of areas. In the business world, the types of impact around sensors, engineering applications, surface coatings. We were talking with President Cross today with one of our distinguished professors about Intel, the largest microprocessing, most important company in terms of the hardware inside a computer. Why would they hire students who've gone through our foundry programs? It's about surface materials, it's about composites that we're conducting the advanced research. So our future Satya Nadella, an alum who's today CEO of Microsoft, we've placed people in the Intels and the Apples and so forth. This is all of our future. So it's that research that works so importantly. I think about expanding our reach, and I think about our colleagues in Waukesha and Washington County who will be able to participate and will build on the strengths of those campuses as well, where they have student focus as well as the research. The final area of progress is around community engagement and the talent pipeline. Lots of things are involved here. Some of you have heard this phrase before. I call it SAJAC acronym. It stands for Social Entrepreneurship, Justice, and Equity Compact. The types of things that we do here are remarkable. Usually these involve partnerships with those in the community. So if I were to give you an example of one that's fairly successful, we can think about what we call the Explorers program. And this is a pre-college cohort that involves a parent skill building conference. Our faculty and staff partner with more than 30 different community groups related to poverty talent development. A small microcosm of this, where much of this started, was a small grant that we provided with the support of UW System on something called Advancing the Village. We had 24 different applications, and we ultimately had eight winners, and one called Advancing the Village brought our College of Nursing, the House of Peace in Milwaukee, and the Capuchin Community Services. And what they put together was a program for positive parenting, for strong family growth for those living in poverty. And I can show you a lot of different targeted programs in some of our most challenging zip codes. We have today almost 80% of our students who have internships or other types of work experience, such as field, co-ops, clinical, student teaching activities related to their degrees, leading to very high placement rates. We have greater alumni programming than ever. And in terms of talent pipeline, if we look at the areas, whether it's in nursing or engineering or business, remarkably between 80 and 96% placement rates in each of those areas. With respect to something that Regent Hall asked about in a meeting this morning, what are we doing to better strengthen our work for underrepresented students? I want to speak to that briefly. One of the programs, among many others that are led by our Vice Chancellor of Global Inclusion and Engagement, Joan Prince, deals with something we call Panther Foundation for Success. Half a dozen companies in the community have come together and they said, we want to further diversify our workforce. And they've helped sponsor programs that for the last several years have increased both the soft skill side and the academic side, and really helped with these students in terms of full-time internship programs, and most of them being placed for full-time employment after they've worked. We heard on a panel yesterday from M7, the president of Manpower North America, how increasingly employers are going to be looking at the soft skills as the foundation. We can train on the technology. We really need those soft skills. So Panther Foundation for Success is moving ahead. We also have in the Lubar School of Business a minority mentoring program that's very important for helping with the tracking. We have a number of scholarship programs, from the McNair Scholarship Program to a number of different foundations and individual philanthropic support for scholarships for underrepresented students and those living in Milwaukee who are academically strong but do not have the financial means. And that continues to be the biggest challenge. So we've got at least a dozen different types of programs that we are engaged in, and we need, as I said before, we need to do more. The last area I'd like to talk about is partnerships. I've talked about principles, progress, and that leads us to be able to talk more cohesively and coherently about partnerships. These are the big, high-impact areas. They involve more than one school or college. They have significant student gateway opportunities. They involve usually state, federal, and/or philanthropic support, and they're really important for the future of the region. Why is the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center so important? If you look at the Kauffman Index, a number that you may not be excited about, because Wisconsin is number 50 out of 50 again. It's the lowest in terms of startups, and Milwaukee, in terms of metro areas, is number 39 out of 40. I'm talking from the bottom in terms of startup activity. We really need to focus more. So we have taken this on, and we, thanks to the generosity of Shell and Marianne Lubar, which also then was supported by UW System to help build the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center. And we have raised over $15 million today, which generates great revenue for us to be able to operate the center. We've got a lot of different programs. You can see across the bottom the over 300% increase in the different types of programs, the number of students that have been involved in just the last few years alone. So we really seek to make a difference in the entrepreneurial and innovation work that's going on. And I won't go through all of the details, but there's some really exciting activities. We've got not only millions of dollars involved with a startup, but add-on funding is usually 4 to 5 times in terms of the additional work that's come in as follow-up funding for a lot of these companies. You've probably heard last fall, there was a lot of fanfare when we announced the Connected Systems Institute. There's a lot of detail on this particular picture. I won't go through all of it, but let me stand back and say, what are connected systems all about? Think Internet of Things, and think about how connected your homes, your cars, our factories are today. And we have had companies that have come to us and said, we need to have students who are, while they major in different areas, we need them to understand how the systems talk to each other, the role of sensors, the role of cultural change, how we have greater opportunities in these particular areas. So we, working with a number of partners, who I'll talk about in a moment, are working to create a system of connectivity, and if you think about this in terms of a digital nervous system that will really help grow this. There's tremendous focus on students, both in terms of those in our undergraduate and graduate programs, but also focus on executives and those managing organizations today. We are focused also on the research and problem solving. How do we help companies drive efficiencies greater, so companies like Rockwell that are so pivotal for this, and companies that really want to maximize revenue opportunities, so looking at both sides. But ultimately, it's the partnership starting with our educational partners first. We have developed a partnership with UW Parkside. Thank you, Chancellor Ford. Our work with Gateway Technical College is foundational, but we've also got partnerships we're exploring with all UW system engineering schools. I can tell you that Chancellor Meyer at UW Stout and Brian Albrecht, the president of Gateway, have been partnering, and I've talked to Brian Bob yesterday about the work that you're doing and how you've been involved with a lot of the corporate visits. So focusing at both the technical school level, focusing at the four-year and graduate level, as well as bringing IoT or Industry 4.0 curricula to high schools is pivotal. This is our future. Wisconsin has a great opportunity to really take a lead position. So the picture that brings some of this to life in terms of the corporate and support partners, the investors in this so far include Rockwell, Microsoft, where our Satya Nadella alumni is at. Satya and I, when I visited him a couple of times, and Blake Moret, who's the CEO of Rockwell, who spoke to you last year, we went out and visited Satya about 2 months ago, and he's increased his commitment. We have participation from the other companies listed here, and Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation has invested almost $1 million for 3 years. So we've got some significant facilities that will come together. So it's about relationships and impact. And I would stress that this is now, and this is truly the future, and we're positioned well with preparing students for the future. I've mentioned the partnerships, and you heard both President Cross and Chancellor Blank talk about different aspects of the restructuring. The local version of that here in southeastern Wisconsin is that we will be joined with UW Waukesha and UW Washington County. We've had, for the last 6 months, over 160 people working incredibly hard on this transition. We formed a new college that was discussed in the Education Committee today, and you'll be looking at further approval of that at the Regents meeting here. We welcome this opportunity. We think there's great elements, and as Chancellor Blank talked about, first, don't break anything. You bring it, make it work first. So we're making it work first. I call this phase one, or the transactional. And then we build on, we create more opportunities for students, both in terms of access, better pathways to four-year institutions, but also for us to explore and develop programs we're implementing at those campuses as well. There's a partnership. I've often had Superintendent Darian Driver and President Vicki Martin from MATC come in and talk about 2 times over the last few years. I want to stress a few things about this partnership, M-cubed. It's the 3, if you haven't heard this before, it's the 3 M public organizations, MPS, MATC, and UWM, working in an exponential manner. Why is this important? How about 140,000 students in K-12, 2, and 4-year education? There's not a bigger population that's concentrated in the 3 public entities of those types in this state. In a population, southeastern Wisconsin, this is absolutely foundational for us to improve our efforts. We, for a long time, have been the largest provider of teachers for not just Milwaukee Public Schools, but for the state. We've also been, through our master's and doctoral program, the largest provider of principals and superintendents. That is not enough. We have had to engage in curricular development and working with students at the K-12 level in dramatically different ways. I'll give you a few examples of this work. Career focus, math and English curriculum, career path, summer math programs. We had 1,000 students in this room about 2 months ago from MPS, juniors and seniors. Nothing would probably make you more proud of seeing these students who for months had prepared for this day, how to dress, how to put resumes together, and they went around in packs. You very rarely saw an individual solo. They were, they're in this environment that they have not been to. 64 employers came that day. We did a similar program the month before at Milwaukee Area Technical College with 850 students. So they shut these schools down. They bring the schools, they bring the students here, and this is powerful. This is the type of thing. I could tell you about parenting programs that brought all of us to tears with grandparents or aunts and uncles who are the providers of care for their children and their families' children's, and we're trying to change that culture one piece at a time. The final partnership that I'm going to talk about is a new one to most of you. It's called HERA. HERA stands for the Higher Education Regional Alliance. I could have called it RIA, which would have been the Regional Higher Educational Alliance, but if you study your Greek mythology, Hera is more powerful. She's more devious, but she's more powerful. So, Hera represents all academic institutions, 2- and 4-year, public and private, in southeastern Wisconsin. Why this came about originally was that we were facing, you've heard Tim Sheehy come in here and talk about the talent gap. You've talked about, he says the biggest impediment facing the economy for the future, this is Tim as the head of the Metro Milwaukee Association of Commerce. This is pivotal and foundational for us being able to address things. And I'm going to walk through very briefly what's going on here. And I'd like to acknowledge for this region, this is unprecedented for us to be able to bring not only the academic institutions together, but the businesses and the different NGOs and a lot of different partners together. So that's the top left piece of this, to develop this agile, nimble workforce of the future. We work with industry, the top right, and we're working with Manpower right now, and that's what the M7 conference was about yesterday. That's going to provide the demand side of this. What are the demands? Mapping today, but also modeling for the future. And then move to the bottom, lower right, and what you see are the 3 strategic focus areas for this work. College completion, which I've been talking a lot about. Better retention, better graduation, ultimately time to get those folks into the workforce. But how do we do that better? One of the ways is through better program innovation. So I can tell you that legislatively, a lot of the tech colleges in this state do not allow 200-level credit. But working in partnership, we can develop blanket approvals for faster time to degree. So I know Chancellor Ford, the partnerships you've had with Gateway, we can accelerate how quickly those can be developed across this ecosystem. That's an example, and I can give you many, many more that employers are just amazed at the types of conversations that we're having to get them the employees that they need more quickly into their workforce. And the final one is access to talent. And I shared this a little bit with some of you last night. If you're an employer, how many academic institutions can you realistically have partnerships with? You can take a company like Rockwell, and they have 14 globally. They have 4 or 5 in this area. But most of us would be challenged to have more than a half a dozen real substantive partnerships. But how about if you can access across all academic institutions through a portal better access to the talent that you need, and the academic institution saying, here's what we can communicate to parents, students, and guess what, to our programming, to the types of things that we can have better alignment. Right now, our campus is about 60% aligned with a lot of the great academic needs that are out there in terms of professions, high growth needs, job areas, but we can do even better through this. So that's what HERA is about in terms of a lot of the programming that will strengthen and enable this to happen. So I thank all those that are involved in this. So putting this together to talk about the impact, what does this do for our students, I'd like to have you hear from a few of our students about all the things that the principles, the progress, and the partnerships contribute for them to be able to do their thing.
When they ask me where I'm from, when they ask me where I'm going, when they ask me where I belong, when they ask what I'm dreaming of.
I was born in a really small town in central Mexico. I am the youngest of 8. When you're a first-generation student, this dream is not just mine. It's of all of the people that came before me, my parents, my siblings, even my grandparents when they were raising my parents. I wanted to find a way to make Milwaukee my home, and that happened instantly. UWM has so many organizations and different clubs and events that allow you to connect with people that look like you, or that think like you, or that feel like you. Through the Center for International Education here at UWM, I was able to participate in an exchange program. So I chose Spain to study abroad because that's the root of my culture. Spain was a country that widened my vision about the world, and that's going to be a skill that's going to follow me for the rest of my life. As a senior, I was able to become an intern at Waukesha County for the Department of Health and Human Services, and I was able to do social work in the real life, which is really rewarding, and it only reinstated that that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. Mi nombre es Sandra Plasencia González y me voy a recibir como licenciada en Trabajo Social. Cuando te digan que no, tú diles que sí, y sí se puede.
I say here, when they ask me where I belong, I say here, when they ask what I'm dreaming of, I say here. I can promise you'll never forget who we are, the ones who'll break through.
When I was in Iran, I had my own business with my brother. I moved here, I didn't know anyone. When I got here, basically I learned about these programs like Student Startup Challenge or the iCorps program. All the doors opened up. That was huge for me, and it's still huge. How people respect you, how they treat you here at UW. Got into really interesting research. Essentially, we are focusing on brain aneurysms. This MRI gives us a scan of the flow image. So if we can take this to the next step and we can provide more results that shows it's actually working, yes, it could be life-saving. I have like 3 job offers right now. All of them want me to continue my research. It just feels me proud of what I'm doing. This was a great chapter of my life. Being in UW and being in engineering department and being at Milwaukee, we have the greatest nature, I would say, in the States. I've been traveling around. I've seen like 30 states during these last 4 years. It never feels like Wisconsin. And just getting my degree, it's a great feeling. And it's not the end of my life in Wisconsin, because I feel like Wisconsin is home for me now.
Yeah, I can promise you'll never forget who we are, the ones who'll break through on the road that takes you. We are here.
I grew up in Townsend, Wisconsin, went to school in Wabeno. It was extremely tiny. I always knew I wanted to go to Milwaukee. This is where my career would thrive. But I think in the back of all of our minds, we were thinking, you know, where's the money gonna come from? If I ran into an issue with money, I'd have to move home, and that would mean transferring or no school at all. I had a scholarship from UWM for $2,500 a year, which I thought was pretty good. I get a letter in the mail saying that my scholarship was bumped up from $2,500 a year to full tuition. I was so relieved, but then also, you know, there's the GPA requirement with the scholarship. The thing I learned is to wake up scared every day. If you aren't scared to lose something, if you're not working towards something that you might not achieve or that challenges you, then life's not exciting. That pushed me. I applied to the Northwestern Mutual position. I luckily got it, and I continued to intern there until I started with PricewaterhouseCoopers this spring of my senior year. And they'll give offers a year out, so I accepted an offer for 2019 after I finished graduate school. I'm just excited I did it. I mean, everyone in my family was just waiting on me, you know. Come on, graduate, because I'm the first one. So I just can't wait for them to see me walk across the stage. That's going to be the moment, you know, break the glass ceiling.
See how I make it look easy. We are here to flex my dreams be. I am where you walk and see me. We are here. I am here.
Well, aren't those great stories? They're pretty neat. I think a couple of things epitomize, certainly one of them epitomizes so much of the spirit. You know, when facing with opposition, you just drive harder at it. I really like that. And then, of course, waking up scared every day, that's certainly motivational. I hope most of our students don't have that, but there's some lessons there. So if that video does not show you the powerful impact of this campus, I really don't know what will. We help to create life-changing impact for thousands of students every year. In fact, we just graduated 5,400 students. We have put over 30,000 students into the workforce over the last 5.5 years. It's pretty remarkable because out of our 184,000 alumni, we have almost 80% of them that stay here in the state of Wisconsin. So as I summarize, I'd like to stress 3 key points. Number 1, as Milwaukee and southeastern Wisconsin go, so goes the state of Wisconsin. UWM is partnering with leading business, health, education, and government organizations, among others, to grow this region and the state. We've never been more engaged. We've never been more easy to partner with. So this talent and research pipeline work that we're on is going to continue to grow. Second point is that we're evolving to meet a new future. A restructured campus, a responsive, but more than that, a proactive campus, one that's anticipating and really advancing needs. And we have much momentum upon which to build. To do so, continued investment will contribute to meet the needs of southeastern and all of Wisconsin. Third is that every one of the UW system institutions represented in this room, every single one of our campuses is vital for our respective regions. We are the key differentiator for a strong Wisconsin, what the University of Wisconsin system has done and what we can continue to do. As I've said before, no matter how much we're doing today, we have to do more, and further investment is going to enable us. I think when I talk about our stewardship, it's simply prototypical of so many of my colleagues in terms of how lean and how efficiently we achieve amazing things on our campuses. I bow with great humility to our faculty and staff who work so incredibly hard and give so much in so many different ways. I think about this with my son as an alum, a double alum of this university. I think about Regent Emeritus Farrow as you talk about your grandchildren. And she said to me today, you've got a grandchild coming. And I was kind of stunned because I wasn't quite sure if she knew something I knew, with neither of my kids being married. And she meant that we've got another one of her grandchildren coming here. You know the value of UWM, just like you know the value of our UW institutions, all of them, if you've experienced it. There's nothing quite like it. So I want to thank you for your support, for the incredible efforts that you put in as the regents of this system. It is not thankless, it is being thanked, and it's also recognizing the hard and important work that you do. It's with your help and continued support that we can meet the needs, seize opportunities, and continue to strengthen the state of Wisconsin. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Regents, do we have any questions for Chancellor Mone?
Okay.
Seeing none, thank you, Chancellor.
Thank you. Okay.
Turning to item number 7 on the agenda, now we'll hear a report on the President's new Sexual Violence and Harassment Priorities Working Group. And first, President Cross has a few words he'd like to say. President Cross.
Thank you, Regent President Bailing. This new working group is the successor to the UW System Task Force on Sexual Violence and Harassment, which was formed in 2014. That task force, which had cross-disciplinary representatives from all UW System institutions, presented its final report to this board in December of 2016. The report included a series of recommendations, including, among other things, a requirement that all UW System employees and students complete sexual violence and harassment training. Since that presentation, former task force co-chair Ann Builder and research and policy project manager Janelle Ramsell have been largely responsible for coordinating the implementation efforts. I would like to thank both of them for their commitment on this work and for keeping things moving. So going forward, I called for the creation of this new work group to be led by Senior Associate Vice President Shanita Brokenberg, and with UW Systems, she's from UW System, obviously, Human Resources Office, and Quinn Williams, UW System General Counsel. The working group has been charged with monitoring and reporting on the implementation of the recommendations provided in the task force report. To update us on progress made, I will turn now to Shanita Brokenberg. Shanita?
Thank you, President Cross, and good afternoon. So I'm here to provide an update on the task force on sexual violence and sexual harassment. This is actually a progress report on 2 very important recommendations that came forward. One is in the area of policy changes. The Regent Policy Document 14-2, and that covers sexual violence and harassment. And in particular, that covers the prevention of that in the workplace and the academic environment. 14-8 ensures that, or is situated to ensure that the environment is free of conflicts of interest around consensual relationships. The other part of those recommendations included mandatory training on harassment and discrimination prevention for both students and employees. And I'll move quickly through our timeline here. As President Cross said, the recommendations were approved in December 2016. And since then, we've been doing some work with implementation of the mandatory training, and I'll tell you about those numbers that we're very proud of in just a moment. So the training was web-based training on sexual harassment prevention. Again, it covers the academic workplace and online environments. UW System Administration sponsored that training so that training was no cost to institutions. Again, it covers students and employees. The policy changes, UW System Administration provided a policy template for institutions to use in developing their own local policies for implementation. In 2017, Title IX coordinators across the system began to assemble to build community. We charged them also with developing a web space for information on sexual harassment. And then a collaboration site, a SharePoint site, was established for this group to share information and documents. And then also conduct a policy review. So that's 2017. Earlier in this year, 2018, we did a pulse survey to take the temperature on some of the activities around implementation and to kind of understand what the environment was. So we found out some interesting things. It was by no means a comprehensive survey, but we just wanted to know where institutions were with regard to implementing the policies at the local level and the training efforts. And then from that information, President Cross asked myself and the General Counsel to oversee the activities of the work group. So in our pulse survey, 80% of institutions reported to have either revised or are in the process of revising their policies on sexual harassment and sexual violence prevention. And those are the Regent policy documents I just mentioned. We're very proud of the training compliance rates for all full-time employees. You can see those numbers by institutions listed there. It's approximately 99.6 in terms of compliance across UW system institutions. I've bolded the ones that are 100%. That is phenomenal across all of our institutions. That's amazing. Just a note on those completion rates. Those are for employees, full-time employees only. The student rates will be reported to you after October of this year. So in terms of the work of the work group, the group has been charged, and I'll share a little bit more, a deeper dive, moving quickly. The group has been charged with a current state assessment of the Title IX environment. They are charged also with conducting a comprehensive policy review, developing advanced training, some efforts also around item number 4, data collection, in asking and answering how we collect data in terms of our allegations and our disposition of those cases. We're also asking the work group to explore technology. Is there the opportunity to have a central repository where the data is collected and use technology to facilitate easier collection of data and report writing? And then a summary report there, item number 6, is what we expect from this group. So the executive sponsors are, again, myself from UW System Human Resources and Quinn Williams, who is the general counsel. The work group has been set up. We have our chair from UW Green Bay, Christopher Packett, who is the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Policy and Compliance at Green Bay. And the work group consists of 10 members that represent a cross-section of employees and student subject matter experts. I'll make sure I didn't forget anything. Okay, so priority number 1, again, that is the current state assessment, review the reporting structure, ask and answer when claims are escalated, at what point does the institution chancellor enter that communication loop, and also assess compliance across the board with the policy changes and training efforts on the student and employee side. Priority number 2 is, again, a comprehensive policy review with an eye on consistency. We talked a lot about ensuring that the policies read the same across all institutions. So this work group is going to look at the different policies, identify any variations, and try to come up with one consistent policy that works for all institutions on both of those. Priority number 3 is to develop an advanced training curriculum where we, again, look at the training, but more importantly, focus on gaps in terms of our resources on campus, any barriers to completing the training, and any other issues that the work group members want to bring forward to us. The focus or the immediate audience for the advanced training will be administrators, intake specialists, Title IX coordinators and their deputies, and professionals working with victims of trauma. In terms of the data collection, we asked all institutions to bring forward a workflow of their current process, intake through escalation. And the work of this group will be to look at that and to do a similar analysis in terms of, again, when the issues are escalated and where the chancellor is notified in the process, with the hope of standardizing all or a portion of the workflow. And then we asked them to design a future state for claims reporting and workflow based on that information. The next priority is technology. Could we identify one database that all UW system institutions could use and leverage to do this work? How do we become more efficient? How do we realize cost savings with one system? And again, those are some of the tangential benefits that we will realize once we implement that technology. So the outcome of all this work will be a comprehensive report of findings with all of those things that I just identified, the analysis, the future state recommendations, the advanced training schedule, and that is, fingers crossed, due October 31st. So you will see that after that time. So in sum, what I've just covered very, very quickly is the Presidential Priorities Work Group, their charge and focus, those 6 deliverables. We do have a 10-member work group plus the chair, and we are poised to provide an update to you after October 31st. What questions can I answer for you?
I noticed a high level of training across all of the campuses. Did I hear you say that some campuses have not yet implemented the Regent-approved policies that were approved here in December of 2016?
That is correct. That's what you heard me say. And this group is charged with finding out why. Oops, 80%, yes.
He stole my question.
Is it unreasonable, President Cross, to have a report in August rather than in October? Is it unreasonable to expect campuses to be implementing policies of this significance with appropriate sense of urgency?
First of all, there are a number of things that go into the October report, other than just making sure the campuses are complying with the system policy. So it's not unreasonable to expect that these policies are implemented fully before that. I would argue that much of this has been implemented, so let's make sure we understand that, what portion of it isn't or what aspect isn't. And you saw some of the training, that's extensive. And if you look at the student numbers, which is another part of this, those numbers are much higher. She doesn't have that on here, but those numbers are all over 90%, which is pretty amazing for students. But I would add there are some pieces in this that I think we're struggling. What have I asked for? Being an engineer type guy, I asked for a flow chart that showed exactly how the decisions are made and when they're made in what is the process that each campus is using. Why did I ask for that? Because that was the breakdown at Michigan State. So when did the chancellor, in her case, the president, find out about that? And that's part of the challenge here. And I think we have a number of very good processes, but that's part of what's got to be done. So we understand that. The question I think that, I'll lean over to Quinn, I think we're pretty close in terms of implementing the policies. We just have to verify that, and that takes time. The other element in that is that as you look at some of this, we want to make it real simple and easy, not only to identify a problem, but that we properly treat the complainant well in this process. And that was another issue, I think, that has been exposed at other institutions. And part of what I'm getting at is the mechanics of doing this may look good on paper. The question is, will it be effective and rightly done? And that's where Quinn was just confirming to me that Lori from the audit team and others will be checking these things regularly, because I think that's an important part of this.
And I would jump in as well. Regent Whitburn raises a good point. Additionally, let's add on to the August agenda an update so we can make sure that when October comes, fully compliant. Thank you, Regent Whitburn. Other questions, board members? If not, I think, Ray, you had some conclusion comments?
Thank you, Shanita. This discussion and presentation leads us directly into the next subject on our agenda, the employee personnel files and reference checks. Recent media reports that allegations of sexual harassment by UW employee at one institution were not shared with another UW institution as part of a reference check for employment, which revealed a gap in current hiring and reference check practices within our system. We acknowledge that unfortunate gap, and we are proposing to take prompt action to address it. As I've said previously, both before this board and elsewhere, the UW system has zero tolerance for sexual harassment. There's no room for compromise on that whatsoever. So I believe with that comment, I believe Regent President Bailing will introduce the proposed resolution.
Thank you, President Cross. At the request of Governor Walker, President Cross, Vice President Peterson, and myself, we're recommending the Board of Regents consider a resolution calling for the UW system to develop a more robust hiring and reference check process, particularly related to sexual harassment, to be implemented at all UW institutions. If the board approves the resolution calling for the UW system to take action on this issue, I believe our action should be swift and decisive. I would propose bringing a new or revised system policies before the board at the August meeting. With this in mind, I'll now ask Vice President Peterson to introduce that resolution.
Thank you, Regent President Bailing. As Regent Emeritus Margaret Farrow stated so eloquently earlier today, it really is all about our students. And so therefore, it's so very important that this resolution is before all of us today. Our board has a paramount responsibility to ensure the safety of our students and our employees at each institution. And the situation that occurred between UW-Stevens Point and UW-Eau Claire is wholly unacceptable. We're often asked to act more like a system rather than a series of independent institutions. This is without question one of those instances. Creating this policy is necessary, and it will not be made without open discussion. However, it will be made swiftly. We'll work closely with Governor Walker and his administration to find uniform standards in alignment with state practices. When these policies and procedures are in place, the end result must ensure that employee misconduct at one UW system institution cannot be hidden as they seek to work somewhere else within our system. I want to thank President Cross and his team for acting quickly once this situation was discovered and for their work to find a workable policy reform solution. This is an acute issue throughout the country, so I would urge us to seek guidance from our national associations and other systems who are already working to solve this problem elsewhere. The resolution has been provided to all of you. I hope you've had a chance to review it, and at this time I will formally introduce its resolution for passage. Resolution 8 reads Employee Personnel Files and Reference Checks. That upon the recommendation of the President of the University of Wisconsin System and the President of the University of Wisconsin System Board of Regents, the Board of Regents directs the University of Wisconsin System Administration to develop policies that require the following. All UW institutions to share personnel files of all current or former employees with other UW institutions and to the State of Wisconsin Department of Administration's Department of Personnel Management when a current or former employee is being reviewed for employment in any UW institution or state agency. Second, all UW institutions to document allegations or investigations of sexual harassment involving an employee appropriately in personnel files of any employee accused of sexual harassment and the ultimate disposition of the allegation or investigation, i.e. the accused employee is found not responsible, resigned, disciplined, or terminated. I think we've lost our connectivity here. Or third, that all UW institutions have appropriate reference check procedures regarding allegations or investigations of sexual harassment for any current or former employee being hired by or that transfers from another UW institution or outside employer. So that is the resolution as it stands, and I put that forward for our consideration.
Second.
Motion and second. Regents, discussion. Regent Jones.
I wonder if there aren't some due process issues around this sort of policy. For example, you could have an undocumented or unsubstantiated allegation in a file, and it could actually be untrue. and you would effectively be destroying someone's career. So I support what we're trying to do, is share information of this nature. I'm just not sure this does it. Or I think that this might cause some harm to employees of the system.
So if I could, my reaction to that, Regent Jones, I wholeheartedly agree with your sentiments. I think what this policy does today is puts forward recommendations from our board to UW System Administration to consider and care for all of those items in a thoughtful and appropriate manner and in a swift manner so that we have resolution and a policy by August. I agree with you wholeheartedly. You know, individuals are innocent until proven otherwise, and I think that we want to ensure that our employees are not put in, and others are not put in positions where untrue allegations or misguided allegations could be brought forward. So no question, this needs to be done thoughtfully, and I think that's the guidance that we want to put forward. But we also have to ensure that we get compliant with the sharing of personnel policies. And we don't do that today. That was a surprise to so many of us to see. We are not in compliance with state of Wisconsin policies, and I take the opportunity at this time to also point out that there are other quasi-public private agencies like Department of Public Instruction that we'd also believe be covered under this policy, so those personnel files would be shared over time.
Thank you.
Regent Stile.
As regents, one of our most important obligations is the safety of our students. And as a system, we're able to leverage knowledge across the system. Usually, that allows us to further the spread of knowledge and the search for truth. And today, that's a sharing of knowledge to protect our students and staff. And I support the resolution. I think it protects our students and it leverages our system structure. And I'd also request President Cross to notify the board if there's anything that is getting in the way of diligently producing these policies between now and the August meeting. Thank you.
Good point, and thank you, Regent Stile. Regent Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple questions surrounding item 1. I'm very supportive of the recommendation, obviously, that we strengthen our policies, but there's just seems some awkward language here. We have language that I don't understand for employees being reviewed for employment in point number 1. Are those the finalists, or is this a single individual whose name would be shared with DOA? This is just relating to number 1, and then I have a follow-up, please.
For that question, I'm going to refer to Quinn Williams, our General Counsel. Quinn.
Likely the finalist, however, that could be reviewed as part of the policy. It's broad enough to encompass what the potential risks would be under either scenario.
My second point is, there is a risk to this because there's always a concern. This is just the first point now. You're sending all finalist names to DOA. There could be partisan influence from either party. There's always been that concern that if DOA gets to sign off on a position, someone could be looking and saying, I don't like this person. Again, because as I read it, all employees will have their names sent to DOA, and then if there's a problem, of course, there'll be additional information provided. And I wonder how we can, I wonder if you could speak to that.
Go ahead, President Cross.
I think there are two issues. One that Regent Jones brought up that in some ways ties to this issue that Regent Mueller brought up. It's my understanding that the intent would be you would only share that file if they were a finalist or they were actually going to be offered. The same kind of things you do with a reference check. You don't do the reference check until, this is the person you're going to hire or you're looking at. But I think we have to be very careful that allegations or an array of allegations end up becoming the verdict in a process. However, if I put myself on the other end of that, I would like to know that there were allegations of sexual misconduct. So it's a kind of a delicate situation, and it's going to require that when we craft this policy, that we craft it with care and thought, and that we aren't opening ourselves up to more problems than we're creating or solving. And I think that's an important part. However, I would argue we have to do something like this And the risk, as they would say, this is a type A statistical problem as opposed to a type B, and I think that's important.
Regent Ring.
I just wanted to say a few things. One, I agree with Vice President Regent Peterson, as well as Regent Stile, on we need to do more on protecting students, and I think this is the first step. And I'm proud to be supportive of it, and I'm proud that this board is taking it up. I think it's an issue that's been coming to fruition, and I think we just noticed it a couple weeks ago with the incident between UW-Stevens Point and UW-Eau Claire. So I just wanted to say that I'm very supportive of this, and I commend the UW system for bringing this up.
Regent Milner.
First of all, I agree with the points that Regent Jones and Regent Mueller made, and I appreciate the responses from President Cross and from our council. I had the opportunity to watch the televised Regent meeting from from Michigan State. The trustees of Michigan State were discussing the situation that happened in Michigan State. There was a lot of angst and grief for the victims, and the whole time I watched that, I thought the mistake you all are made and aren't acknowledging is a mistake in how you manage the reporting system. Unless a governance group manages a reporting system thoughtfully for employees, yes, but with the ability to find out things that are happening within a system or within an institution, then that's the error made by the governance. And I believe that this is an opportunity to deal with that reporting system or that ability to gather information. And I would, with the caveat that we do need to protect our employees. So the comments made by Regents Jones and Mueller are important, but I very much support this as the first step.
Thank you. Regents, other questions? Regent Atwell.
I think it's a good discussion. I share the concerns of Regent Mueller and Regent Jones, and I think some of the rest of us here. We had an incident that apparently was quite serious, and I think it's natural to kind of make a policy out of an incident. I guess what I'm wondering is, when we look at other state-related agencies, is what we're proposing equivalent or the same as what's happening with other state employees or in our secondary school systems where we have had similar problems? What are we doing, and why would we do anything different?
A very good question, Regent Atwell. Know that as part of our homework through August, consistent with how we've handled tenure, budget matters, and other issues like this, know that we'll definitely take a hard look at other Big Ten campuses, as well as other publicly education systems across the country. So great question, and know that is something we'll certainly take into consideration as we bring a policy back to you in August.
I would just like to point out as a follow-up, if someone's considering hiring a candidate and they do a reference and they find that there's an allegation, even if it's unsubstantiated, the mere existence of an allegation is likely to be sufficient to prevent the person from being hired.
So noted. So noted.
I don't know how you address that if you're going to give them the whole personnel file.
We've been asking that question, Regent Atwell, too.
Regent Atwell, I would agree wholeheartedly with you. These questions are questions that we have had in the last several days. We have put those forward to the Department of Personnel Management. We're going to try and reconcile those, because the flip side of this equation would result in potential litigation for us, which is not our intent. Our intent is safety first.
Well, and a grave injustice to the individual involved. And it's not unknown that we have unsubstantiated allegations, as I think we can see from matters that are before us. I don't want to be Michigan State either, don't get me wrong. But how about let's not be Michigan State?
Let's set the bar a little higher.
Yeah. Sometimes policy's a a blunt instrument to use for a personnel matter.
Understood. No, that will take those concerns into consideration. Thank you, Regent Atwell. Regent Tyler.
So as I'm thinking about this in the context of the speed in which we investigate and take action, I could well imagine an allegation working its way through a process for 6 months or 9 months before resolution is finally reached. And so I just, it is a big concern, because I can imagine word gets out that somebody's applying for something and I don't like that person, and so I file an allegation. I think that's a big concern. The other question that I have is that, if somebody at a different institution outside of Wisconsin, if we do a reference check on them, do we get information from them that says, yeah, there was an allegation and there was a result or a disciplinary action, and do we provide that to others? So if we're protecting students, I guess, are we protecting students in somebody else's system, would be my question, and should that be considered as part of this policy when a reference check is done on somebody from our system going somewhere else?
I think that's a good point, and certainly something we'll again take into consideration as part of what we ultimately produce and present to the board in August. Thank you, Regent Tyler. Regent Creeby.
I would just make one additional point. To some extent, this is a resolution to adopt another resolution. We're going to not adopt a policy until we get a policy back in August, presumably that we're going to adopt. I think that there have been a number of excellent concerns expressed around the table today, and those all should be taken into consideration as we move forward. But this is an ultimately serious matter. We have to do the right thing. We will have the opportunity to look at a final policy, and for that reason, I'm going to support it.
Thank you. Regent Creeby. Thank you, Regent Creeby. Any other questions or discussion, board members? If not, all in favor of Resolution 8, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes, and thank you. Next item on the agenda, I'll ask board members to stay in their place while we complete the roll call vote to move into closed session. Then Regents will relocate to the Fireside Lounge on the first floor. Vice President Peterson, if you could please read the motion to move into closed session.
I move that the Board of Regents move into closed session to A, deliberate regarding a recommendation for dismissal with cause of a UW-Platteville faculty member as permitted by Section 19.851A and B Wisconsin statutes. B, to consider a student request for a review of UW-Madison disciplinary decision as permitted by Section 19.851A, F, and G. C, to consider a student request for review of UW Stevens Point disciplinary decision as permitted by Section 19.851A, F, and G. D, to consider personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons relating to the UW-Oshkosh Foundation matter, which, if discussed in public, would likely have a substantial effect upon the reputation of such persons as permitted by Section 191F. E, to confer with legal counsel regarding pending litigation, Bank First National versus UW-Oshkosh Foundation, Board of Regents versus Sonnleitner and Wells, University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh Foundation Incorporated versus Board of Regents, UW Foundation Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing, and potential litigation as permitted by Section 191G. And finally, Section F, discuss ongoing personnel matters as permitted by Section 19.851C and F. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second, roll call vote.
Regent Bailing?
Yes.
Regent Peterson?
Yes.
Regent Atwell?
Yes.
Regent Delgado?
Yes.
Regent Evers? Regent Greeby?
Yes.
Regent Hall? Regent Jones?
Yes.
Regent Klein? Regent Milner? Regent Mueller? Regent Peterson? Regent Plant? Regent Ring?
Yes.
Regent Stile? Regent Tyler? Regent Whitburn?
Yes.